evening, one and all present here. I am Anoshka Mani, and on behalf of Government Law College, Mumbai, I welcome you all to the 3-day international conference on World Constitution, A New Horizon of Human Rights. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation, said, and I quote, "Fundamental rights can only be those rights, the exercise of which is not only in the interest of the citizen, but that of the whole world." With this in mind, I would like to welcome our chief guest, Professor Glen Martin, a professor of philosophy at Radford University, Virginia, and the president of the World Constitution and the Parliament Association. We are honored by your presence, sir. We are also grateful to have our principal, Dr. Asmita Vaidya, along with us, our senior professors, faculty members, multiple dignitaries, academicians, and students from all over the globe with us. This 3-day international conference is being conducted under the leitmotif of Azadi 75 and is one of the 75 such programs on constitutional law being conducted by Government Law College, Mumbai, commemorating 75 years of Indian independence. Before we commence today's conference, I request Ketayon to kindly play the Saraswati Vandana, calling upon Goddess Saraswati to shower us all with her blessings.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युत शङ्कर प्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा.
I would now like to request the welcome song to be played. This song has been sung by Astha Sharma, who is a student of our college.
Hello everyone, my name is Astha Sharma and a very warm welcome to all of you. स्वागत की सुमधुर बेला में भाव पुष्प क्या अर्पित कर दें. आज कृतार्थ प्रफुल्लित मन हम कौन शब्द से वंदन कर दे. बह रही पवन मादकता से हर पल पर है उल्लास नया. मिलने को है वरदान हमें साधना परिधि से नया नया. इस शुभ अवसर के आने पर क्या पलक पावड़े बिछवा दें. स्वागत की.
A big thank you to Astha Sharma for singing the welcome song so melodiously. I now request our convener, Professor Nuzhat Sheikh ma'am, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Anushka. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to quote Octavio Paz. I quote, "Any culture is born in mixing, interaction, and in confrontation. Conversely, it is in isolation that civilization dies." Unquote. Myself, Mrs. Nuzhat Afroz Sheikh, Assistant Professor, Government Law College, and the convener of 3 days International Conference on World Constitution, A New Horizon of Human Rights, organized by Government Law College, Mumbai. I welcome you all on behalf of Government Law College and on behalf of the organizing committee. The chief guest, for the inaugural function, Honorable Dr. Glen Martin, President of the World Constitution and Parliament Association from United States of America, I welcome you, sir, for gracing this occasion by accepting the invitation to enlighten us today for the broader themes of the 3 days international conference, World Constitution, A New Horizon of Human Rights. Likewise, I would like to welcome our principal, Government Law College, Mumbai, and the organizing secretary of our international conference, Honorable Dr. Asmita Vaidya, Madam. I would like to welcome all the honorable members of the Governing Council of Government Law College, Mumbai, on the occasion for their encouragement and continuous support. Likewise, I welcome all the keynote speakers and the chairpersons of all the sessions for accepting the invitation and to be a part of this international conference for the coming 3 days, which would offer all the participants and the paper presenter to witness the forthcoming presentation, discussion, findings, and solutions. This conference will be a benchmark and will give us all the opportunity to get the information and knowledge about the World Constitution and to ponder on the various aspects responsible for the making of the World Constitution. The challenges related to it, which are meticulously designed, divided under the 5 broader sub-themes of this international conference. I also welcome all the full-time faculty members, as well as all the adjunct faculty and the visiting faculty members of the Government Law College, Mumbai. Likewise, I welcome respected Madam Senior Faculty, Dr. Rachita Ratho, Associate Professor, Government Law College. Respected Mr. P.V. Duffel, Assistant Professor, Government Law College. Respected Madam Mrs. Kavita Herao, Assistant Professor, Government Law College, and also the co-convener, Ms. Kritika Temburnikar, Assistant Professor, Government Law College, and all the faculty members attending this international conference. I would like to welcome all the students from the Government Law College, Mumbai, and also the law and non-law students participating and attending it from all the corners of the world. Now coming to our today's international conference, to begin with, as we all know that modern world has paid a very heavy price as a result of the First and Second World War, ending in 1918 and 1945 respectively. The bloodshed, unstoppable at one time, was at the backdrop of having institution, a mechanism which would probably do not drag the human race to the point of extinction. The generation who had paid the heavy price for not voicing against the vices and had suffered to the whimsical and tyranny of the dictators and the equal contributions of the developed nations indulged into the race for conquering and controlling the colonial empires across the globe. This has thrown the masses into the darkness of extreme poverty, hunger, and disease. The modern world have seen a mind-boggling transformation of mankind from the beginning of the century. The advent of new technologies lead to the invention and discoveries having impact on the lives of the people at large. The liberation of the colonial state towards the formation of new world civilized states with the inclusion of practice of democracy across the globe under the siege of communist and the dictator existence marked the new beginning of the world, state, and the people with the end of the Second World War. Recognizing the utmost need and the urgency of having peace and harmony, this is how the Charter of 1945, formation of United Nations, and the blueprint of Universal Declaration of Human Rights put forth the central idea of World Constitution. The need to address various issues, including the protection of human values and lives through the universal recognition and uniform practice of human rights, paved the way for having one universal approach. The need to fill it in one binding, universal, supreme living document that is the World Constitution. Government Law College take this opportunity to have deliberation on the need of having World Constitution providing the much required platform for the jurists, academicians, advocates, and the students, etc. The present international conference is an attempt to focus on various components and the parameters constituting the main framework of the World Constitution. So here we welcome the research scholars across the globe to share their notions and ideas on the subject of World Constitution and make their contribution in shaping the new world document benefiting the universal citizen irrespective of nationality, race, and gender. The Honorable Principal Madam, who has initiated the idea of having an international conference on the very topic World Constitution and the human rights. As the convener vested with the responsibility to formulate the idea into the international conference themes and sub-themes, which touches the every aspect and component of human values, human existence, and human-to-human behavior with all the existing barriers of ideologies, nationalities, religion, race, faith, belief, gender, sexual orientation, cuisines, culture, and language, etc. And the day has come to actually witness the beginning of the new era in the form of international conference at Government Law College, Mumbai, to contribute in the wellness process of human values and the protection for everlasting struggle to preserve and practice peace and prosperity for an individual, society, nation, and the universe at large, being the part and parcel of the democratic system and the system of governance for the mankind, rather I say humankind. I'm extremely thankful to the organizing committee and the Honorable Principal Madam for giving me this opportunity and privilege to act as the convener of this first ever international conference of its kind. I thank you all, the team members who effortlessly contributed in making this international conference a grand success in all aspects. Thank you all. Yes, Anushka.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for such eloquent and enigmatic words. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce our chief guest and keynote speaker of this evening, Professor Dr. Glen Martin. Dr. Martin is a professor of philosophy at Radford University, Virginia, and is the chairperson of the Radford University program in peace studies. As a world citizen, he has worked in the service of world peace with justice for many years, traveling and lecturing worldwide and authoring many books and articles on behalf of a holistic and transformed global paradigm and world system. Professor Martin is the president of the International Philosophers for Peace, the president of the Institute on World Problems, and the president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association. As a result of his peace initiatives, Professor Martin has received several international awards, including the 2005 ISISAR.Global Peace Award in Kolkata, the 2008 World Peace Award from the Office of the World Peace Envoy in Bangkok, the 2011 Lighthouse of the World Award from the WCPA Asia and Bharat Vikas Parishad in Chennai, and the 2013 Gusi International Peace Prize in Manila. Professor Martin has also been nominated for the Mahatma Gandhi Peace Award and the Prize of Asturias Award for Peace. He is the author of several books such as The Millennium Dawn, The Philosophy of Planetary Crisis and Human Liberation, Ascent to Freedom, Practical and Philosophical Foundations of Democratic World Law, and One World Reborn, The New Philosophical Holism and Our Global Social Contract, among others. His newest book, titled The Earth Constitution Solution, Designed for a Living Plant, was launched in July 2021. Professor Martin has been kind enough to grace our inaugural function today, and we are extremely honored by his presence. I would now request Professor Martin to kindly mark the occasion with a few words.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and also Professor Shaka for her background, her wonderful background about our situation coming out of 2 world wars and so on. And I want to thank.
I think I paid all the bills in December and can get for January, but we'll just check.
Was that? And I want to thank Principal Dr. Asmita Vaidya too for taking the lead on organizing this wonderful conference, and all of the people that are present here. My paper that I wrote for this occasion is about paradigm shift. It's about the need for human beings on this planet to think in a planetary way. And so this is the paper that I am presenting here. The broadest function of legitimate law is to protect individual human rights, that is our freedom and dignity, within the framework of the common good of the whole. Human beings are both an I and a we. We are not only individuals who have infinite dignity that must be protected and respected by government, but all of us are necessarily and integrally part of a we, the we of humanity. These two aspects of ourselves are intimately connected, even though they can be distinguished. They're intimately together, the I and the we. The holistic vision of the world has only begun to comprehend this in the late 20th century, distinguishing the I from the we, but not separating them. We're all human beings and bound to one another in our surrounding planet as such. The primary legitimate function of law is to protect the I within the framework of the common good of the we. I will show in this paper why both dimensions of this function require ratification of the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. I will show why neither of these dimensions can be effectively realized under the present system of sovereign militarized nation states. It's those sovereign militarized nation states that resulted in World War I and World War II, and it's those sovereign militarized nation states that are now in a treaty situation in the United Nations. It's a treaty. It's not a world government. It's a treaty of sovereign nations. So-called natural law theorists from the time of Aristotle through St. Thomas Aquinas and contemporary philosophers such as Lon Fuller and John Finnis emphasize that law overlaps with morality, with moral obligation. And these thinkers argued that law reflects that moral dimension in various ways and forms, a necessary feature in the actualization of law. Human rights themselves are rationally recognizable moral principles. That is, the fact that you and I have any rights, if I have a right to life, for example, then if I really have that right to life, then your duty is to respect and honor my right to life. There's a reciprocity between rights and duties always. Still, other thinkers, such as those linked with Russian philosophy deriving from Eastern Orthodox religious thought, or Indian philosophers like Sri Aurobindo, or Western evolutionary thinkers like Teilhard de Chardin, attempted to show that this moral dimension, valid as it may be, arises from the deep mystery of the divine oneness, immanent within the multiplicities of the cosmos. The existential realization of this oneness reveals an infinite depth to human life. And I submit that this is what Mahatma Gandhi recognized, did he not? In each person, this infinite depth in human life. There's also an emergent evolutionary imperative within human life that must be recognized if we are to organize ourselves under law for a truly flourishing and fullness of human existence. 3 generations of human rights have been developed since the 18th century first began to recognize these as universal. The first generation is political rights. That is the freedom to participate in government, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. But the second generation of rights is socially and economic rights, right? The right of people to a living wage, to Social Security, to healthcare. But the third generation of rights, recognized by many scholars, are those rights that have only emerged in the last half century, because there's a planetary consciousness emerging, especially since 1961, when we first saw those photos projected from space, back from space, of the Earth floating there. We began to have a widespread feeling of the planetary consciousness. And these are the rights to peace and a right to protected planetary environment. And notice that these rights cannot be actualized by any nation, even the biggest nations, right? Because they're planetary rights. These planetary rights are integrally related to the emerging consciousness of our situation as beings who are inherently communally constituted, that is arising from the evolutionary process as a common human phenomenon. The vast paradigm shift that has taken place in all the sciences throughout the 20th and 21st centuries has revealed the integral interdependence of wholes and parts throughout the whole scale of nature. Human beings are part of the living Earth system, and we are also one as an emerging species aware of the divine telos directing us to ever greater self-realization. The ancient religions of all traditions have already recognized that each person is a microcosm of the macrocosm. The dimensions of the universe and the divine life live within us. Each of us is an integral synthesis of body, mind, and spirit. And for this reason, human beings everywhere are not simply a collection of innumerable eyes, not simply a compilation of individuals. We're not just 8 billion of us. We are at the same time a we. And we're made in the image and likeness of the integral life of the cosmos. And this I carries universal human rights precisely because at the same time it is a living we. How are we to understand this becoming embodied within human history? Russian philosopher Vladimir Soloviev observes that a great step forward in human civilization took place in the 18th century with the French Revolution and its declaration of the rights of man, rights of human beings. He writes that, quote, the principle of human rights was extremely important and new for the whole world at that time, unquote. However, he observes that the universality of this principle was compromised when the French revolutionary forces framed the idea as rights of man and the citizen. Because, he says, citizen is a limited category that excludes those who are not citizens. Universal human rights are immediately compromised as soon as they are limited to being citizens of this or that republic, excluding others who are foreigners, who are not so protected by the laws applying only to citizens. Since that time, because of this compromising of the universality of the principle of human rights, those who are considered not citizens, both within nations and worldwide, have often seen terrible abuses of their universal human rights. Can law protect universal human rights? Where does the constituent power to make law come from? Who makes authentic, legitimate law? Where does the proper law to protect universal human rights lie? Both lie within our universal humanity, with the people of Earth as an integral whole, and the we domain of human existence. This issue was dramatized again, also in the French Revolution. Before the French Revolution, tradition going back many centuries held that the king, divinely appointed by God and sanctioned by the Holy Roman Catholic Church, held the right to make and enforce laws, and that these laws were widely held throughout Europe at the time. These ideas were held in Europe at the time. However, some 17th century thinkers, such as Althusius and Spinoza in the Netherlands, held that the constituent power to make legitimate laws came from the people themselves, not from the divine right of kings. The monarchies called such ideas traitorous, but the French Revolution was based on just such ideas. The constituent power to make the laws came from the people as a whole, not from some divinely sanctioned inheritance of royalty. The French revolutionary idea, like the American revolutionary ideal that followed in the same era, involved the understanding that the people are sovereign and the true source of legitimate law and governmental authority, the authority that binds any authentic community into a common we under universal laws ideally directed to the common good of the whole. The common good means the we as a collective reality supersedes the I if that I egoistically wishes to assert itself in violation of the common good or in violation of other members of the community. But who is this we? Why do we assume that this we, that is the source of legitimate governmental power, must suddenly end just 1 inch over some artificial boundary line, excluding those across the boundary from being part of this constituent power? In his famous book, The Anatomy of Peace, Emery Reeves wrote, quote, "A picture of the world pieced together like a mosaic from its various national components is a picture that never, in no circumstances, can have any relation to reality," unquote. The reality is that we are all part of one human community living on one precious planetary home. The we is the sovereign source of legitimate law. That is all of us. Yet historically, human beings have sliced this we up and militarized it to the point where we are in danger of making our very species extinct with these weapons of mass destruction and with climate collapse. The essential ideas of democracy, of democratic revolutions of the 18th century were twofold, therefore. Universal human rights of all people were recognized, and the inherent sovereignty of all the people who generate the laws and government under which we must live. But the qualifier added to the rights during the French Revolution, because it mistakenly limited the concept of citizen to national boundaries, right? It continues to this day to interfere with the divinely inspired self-realization of humanity. The French revolutionaries declared the universal rights of man and the citizen. And yet from that day to the present, there has never been any significant recognition of universal citizenship. From the 18th century, recognition of the people as a true legitimate constituent power to the crises of the 21st century involves a 200-year-long and complex history. But yet one thing is clear: the 18th century recognition of the people as sovereign was framed within a very parochial view of the world. The 18th century, 2 centuries ago, the world was divided into races, along with slavery, nation-state power centers with absolute boundaries, male domination of women, the genocide of indigenous people, and pervasive religious discrimination. When Thomas Jefferson penned the famous words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," he was expressing the foundations of the constituent and revolutionary power in an ideal form. The reality on the ground was fragmentation and extreme inequality, including the division of all human beings into antagonistic militarized national entities. The constituent power to make and enforce laws in the early United States was formed by wealthy, white, property-owning males, hardly we the people. Women, blacks, poor, indigenous people, and other excluded groups had to fight for the next 2 centuries to have their share in the constituent power recognized through voting rights. They're still fighting, as you know from the news. They're still fighting for that. But why did this fight arbitrarily stop at national boundaries? The constituent power properly resides with all the people of Earth. The legitimate authority of government derives from the fact that the global community is a reality. The I that bears universal human rights is inseparable from the we that underlies legitimate constituent power in government. Each of us embodies the whole. We are only incarnations of we are all not only incarnations of personal dignity, we are mirrors, incarnations of the whole of humanity and the divine ground of being. Authentic citizenship, therefore, can only be global and therefore coextensive with universal human rights. The constituent power of the sovereign we must then be delegated to a world authority under the world constitution, and from there to national authorities, regional and local authorities. In other words, sovereignty belongs to the people of Earth, and sovereignty can be delegated and should be delegated to various regional levels, to the national level, to the regional level of the states like Maharashtra, and to the local levels like cities like Mumbai and so on. This is the only legitimate hierarchy of democratic laws. Legitimate lawmaking power arises from the people and the sovereignty of the people of Earth. The preamble to the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights states correctly that the recognition of the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation for freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Okay, recognition of those rights is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace. Why has this not happened? What do we mean by recognition here? Is it merely lip service? Or must this recognition be institutionalized by an Earth Constitution? Do the institutions of the militarized sovereign nation states, like unregulated capitalism, destroy the protection of human rights at every turn? Imperial nations like the United States declare that the UN Universal Declaration is merely symbolic. It carries no force of law, allowing them to invade, overthrow, assassinate, blockade other nations at will. Beyond the level of law within sovereign nations, the world is a chaos of lawlessness. Today, governmental authority, while worldwide, continues to exist in practice with the so-called sovereign nation states. Each state is ruled by a small group dominated by wealth and power of a few. Each state claims a separate constituent power for itself, nearly 200 separate constituent powers, independent of the rest of humanity. The result is chaos, ceaseless war, internecine struggle, pervasive suspicion, unbridled competition, environmental destruction, hate, fear, and endless human rights violations. As human rights scholars have pointed out, under this situation, there can be no single set of enforceable laws protecting universal human rights. It is up, and this is literally true, it is up to each nation to protect or not so-called universal human rights. Each government does it, and there is no unifying government to do it for everybody. And the facts on the ground show that security concerns, as well as economic priorities of nations, routinely trump the idea of universal human rights. The chaos and violation of these rights worldwide today is most fundamentally a consequence of the failure of the people of Earth to recognize the second universality that emerged from the revolutionary struggles of the 18th century, that the people are sovereign. To recognize this is the correct universal principle of law that would make perfect sense in the French Declaration of Human Rights of Man and the Citizen. Rights are universal, citizenship is universal. That would make perfect sense. Just as our human rights are universal, and so should be the constituent power to make and enforce laws. For militarized sovereign nation states, the Universal Declaration of Rights is necessarily merely symbolic, since the institutional reality requires that they exploit one another economically, that they threaten one another militarily, both of which systematically violate human rights. This is a product of madness. And human beings are only growing to maturity. We're not there yet. And on the way in our adolescence, there's a certain madness that takes over. It's taken over in the United States, as you may be well aware from the news. It has hopelessly fragmented the 20th and 21st century Earth into an omnicidal race toward Armageddon through nuclear or biological weapons, as well as climate destruction. The plain reason for this madness is that a humanity fragmented into some 200 competing slices can in no way represent the true constituent power. If my government has missiles ready and aimed at some rival national entity, then it is already denying the right to life, liberty, and security of persons. That's the first of the UN rights, right? The right to life, liberty, and security of a person. If I'm aiming missiles at you, I'm denying your right to that. If my government taxes its own citizens to build and deploy defensive missiles, money that should be spent on ending poverty or protecting the environment, then my government is denying my right to life, liberty, and security of person. To protect or promote the war system in any way, and the world of sovereign nations is inherently a war system, it violates not only universal human rights, but the principle of the sovereignty of the whole, the community of Earth. So in conclusion, I want to say that the Constitution for the Federation of Earth is the instrument or vehicle for activating the sovereignty of the people of Earth and exercising their lawmaking authority. It is founded on the principle of unity and diversity. It embraces all diversities, genders, nations, races, cultures. It embraces the principle of universal dignity, as well as the principle of the common good of the whole. Law is only fully legitimate as world law. The law at the regional, local levels is fully legitimate when it is delegated from the world law level to the local constituencies everywhere on Earth. Proper government is always both top down and bottom up. The people, as sovereign, elect the governors from the bottom up to operate within a constitutional framework as the top-down unifying principle, embracing and protecting the diversity of all. They establish government to represent them in its dual function of both the I and the we. Legitimate law cannot be constructed from the bottom-up lawmaking process that refuses to recognize the sovereignty of the whole. This piecemeal approach was that of the League of Nations, and now the United Nations, both utter failures in keeping the peace or protecting human rights. Right? We just celebrated 75 years anniversary of the United Nations. It has failed utterly to keep the peace or protect universal human rights. You do not add up a collection of single human beings to get universal human rights. Rather, you recognize the a priori dignity and infinite worth of all persons as such. It's a priori. It's not a matter of just adding up people. Similarly, you do not add up a collection of claimed individual sovereignties to get a legitimate constituent authority. You can't put together nations that claim they're absolutely sovereign and ever get a legitimate constituent authority for the planet. Rather, you have to recognize the priority of the we, the priority of the whole, the we of unity and diversity in its relationship to the parts. This is precisely the significance of the Constitution for the Federation of Earth in its active manifestation in sessions of the Provisional World Parliament. We just held the 15th session in New Delhi, India. Supporters of the Earth Constitution today represent the sovereignty of the people of Earth who form the true constituent power for all law and governmental authority. Even though today the power to make and enforce laws remains with the elite-dominated militarized nation states, the Provisional World Parliament meets and votes and makes provisional world laws under the understanding that it truly represents the sovereignty of humanity. It represents the true constituent of power, which lies with the people of Earth, and that is rationally organized and manifested through the Earth Constitution. And that is why the Constitution for the Federation of Earth makes possible both authentic democracy for the Earth and the protection of universal human rights. Democracy means the sovereignty of the people as we, and the protection of universal human rights of each I. In other words, we cannot protect universal human rights unless there is universal citizenship with its planetary constituent power. We need to make this happen rapidly because human beings, under the deranged militarized system of national sovereign entities, are in real danger of making themselves extinct. And I want to submit as my last sentence to you all that making ourselves extinct would mean the ultimate violation of our universal human rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening and interesting paper on the Earth Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the much awaited paper presentations. The general rules for the presentation are as follows. There will be 4 paper presenters this evening. Each presenter will get a total of 10 minutes to present their papers. Each presenter will have to mandatorily finish their presentations in 7 minutes, and the remaining 3 minutes will be reserved for question and answers. Each presentation will be strictly timed, and adequate warnings will be given to the presenters. The timekeeper shall be putting up a message on the chat box and putting a chime as a warning bell when the time to speak ends. With this, let us commence. Our first presenter is Mr. Anand Kamble, a student at Singer Law School, Pune. Mr. Kamble will be presenting on the topic, the concept of welfare state and the Earth Constitution, a welfare analysis.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Anand Kamble. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Honorable Chief Guest, respected Chairperson of the function, and all other dignitaries of the function. I, Anand Kamble, finally a student of LLB studying in Siengat Law College, Pune. Today, I am going to discuss about the welfare state and the Earth Constitution. I am going to compare the welfare state and the Earth Constitution, whether the Earth Constitution provides the welfare provisions or not. Ladies and gentlemen, a welfare state is a state in which the state must take the responsibility for the welfare of its citizens, and this responsibility is totally completely inclusive. This responsibility is not only welfare provisions, but these welfare provisions are the fundamental rights of the people of this earth, and these fundamental rights are universally applied rights. So the welfare state must have take the responsibility of the welfare citizens. The welfare state can also mean to create the security network and minimum standards of different types of the welfare. And to achieve this goal, the Earth Constitution and the Parliament Association created the Earth Constitution, which embodied human welfare and made the world an ideal place. The great Hungarian journalist told that to have created a welfare state was a great achievement, but we must go on to create a welfare planet, and we need to create a welfare planet, and that is why the Earth Constitution gives the welfare planet to gives the welfare provisions of the earth. I request the organizers, please go on the next slide. The main idea of the welfare state is that the welfare state plays a significant role in the development of the people. I'm going to deal with the concept of welfare state. We must need to understand what is the welfare state and what are the features of welfare state. The main function of welfare state is the welfare state plays the significant role in the development of. Also, it protects the interest of the citizens, and this concept is based on the equality of opportunity, equality of status, and equitable distribution of the wealth. And welfare state plays a key role in the protection and the promotion of social and economical welfare of its citizens. And the welfare state focuses on the government responsibility for those who are unable to avail their minimum provisions of good life also. And under this system, the welfare state provides the responsibility and provides the welfare provisions to the peoples of the earth. And in these provisions, the welfare state provides the public health, public transportation, child care, public parks and libraries, as well as many other goods and services as well. And the state also provides the equal pay through the education, housing, subsistence, healthcare, pension, unemployment insurances, sick leave, in some cases, supplementary income, price and wage control as well. Please turn the next slide. I'm going to deal next, further moving, I'm going to deal with the key features of the Earth welfare state. I request the organizers, please show the next slide. Sorry, previous slide. The features of Earth Constitution. Yeah, okay. As you can see, these are the features of Earth welfare state. The welfare state controls all the private industries and economic activities of the state, and this government has a major role to play the controlling economics and development of the social welfare of the state. And this principle is based on the equality, and that is why welfare state is responsible for the providing the justice to the people and meeting their needs. Because today peoples are faces more the lot of officers to meet their needs, and as far as these officers are concerned, these officers are most of time these officers are found corrupt. So the common man suffers from the injustice, and that is why it is the duty of the welfare state to provide justice to the common people and meet their needs also. And this principle, this welfare state also provides the financial and social services like the general education, public health, public transport, and the financial assistance to the people as well, from providing well-equipped service to the every person. Please turn the next slide. Now, I am going to compare the welfare state and the Earth Constitution, whether the Earth Constitution deals with the provisions, welfare provisions for the peoples or not. Article 12 and Article 13 of the Earth Constitution deals with fundamental rights and directive principles. There are total 19 directive principles are enriched in under Article 13 of the World Constitution, but I'm not going to deal with all because of the limitation of time. So I have highlighted some of the important guidelines which are important for the basic of the welfare provisions. It includes the adequate means of livelihood, adequate public health, equal opportunity to all peoples, and the protection of environment is also important thing. Without environment we are nothing. So the protection of environment is also essential thing in today's world. So that is why protection of environment is also the guideline given under Article 13, Clause 9 of the Directive Principle in the Earth Constitution. And along with this, other welfare provisions also added in this directive principles. But these directive principles are not justified. Neither any law nor any constitution are obliges to the government to implement these principles, and that is why the fundamental rights are given under Article 12. Please turn next slide. I'm going to deal with fundamental rights, because fundamental rights are enforceable and no person shall be deprived with the fundamental rights, and that is why Article 12 of the Earth Constitution gives the fundamental rights to the people of Earth. And these rights, there are total 18 rights are given under Article 12 of the Earth Constitution. I am going to deal with some of them, and these are the basic rights of the welfare for the welfare of the people of the earth. And in these rights include right to equality, means the all peoples are equal before the Earth Constitution and the World Parliament, and to keep the democracy in the world. That is why the freedom of vote is also given under Article 12, and these all other rights are also given under fundamental rights. I'm seeing the message of time within just a few seconds. I am going to conclude my speech with this. To give better welfare provisions for the people of the earth, we need to implement this Earth Constitution. Today we can see there are many countries, many peoples who are facing the lot of injustice, lot of problems with countries, with their countries and other countries as well. Lot of migrant peoples who even don't have their motherland as well. For these all peoples, for the welfare of these all peoples, we must implement the World Constitution and these all welfare provisions for the people of the world. Thank you for your patience listening, and thank you for the giving me opportunity over present over here. Thank you one and all.
Anushka.
Now there are 3 minutes reserved for anybody who has any questions to ask to the presenter.
I have one comment, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Very, very nice presentation. I appreciate your presentation. I just like to point out that in Article 12 and 13, the preamble to Article 13 also calls those directive principles rights, right? It says there in the opening paragraph, these are additional rights, right? But they're not immediately realizable. And I think that's an important point that, you know, for all of us to keep in mind. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, sir.
Any other questions? If none, then we may proceed to our second presenter for today. Okay, so our next presenter is Dr. Kapil Churpugar, Assistant Professor of Law at Shri Omkarnath Malpani Law College, Samnagar. Dr. Churpugar will be presenting on the topic, A Dream of World Constitution and Reality.
I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Due to network problem, I switch off my camera. I apologize for this. Good evening to one and all. I'm Dr. Kapil Chaurpagar, Assistant Professor Shri Omkarnath Malpani Law College, Sangamner, District Ahmednagar, Maharashtra, and presenting my paper in first technical session of this 3 days international conference on World Constitution, New Horizon of Human Rights. The title of my paper is A Dream of World Constitution and Reality. Next slide, please. At the outset, it is important to understand the meaning and the concept of constitution. In the modern world, every nation has its own constitution to run its function within its territory. It is essential for every state to establish some fundamental organ which can function on its behalf and manage state activities. Constitution is a document which establishes these basic organs of the state, define their structure, power, function, and their mutual relation as well as relations with its people, more particularly political relationship. Constitution plays an important role to bring people of the country in a common faith. It binds people together in unique thread of nationality. The modern era of 21st century is the age of technology, and it has changed the lives of the people at large. This change is connected with establishing peace and harmony worldwide. One thought in this direction is to establish world constitution, which can bring together the world community under the common roof of human race. Next slide, please. Speaking about the historical background of the world constitution, it is observed that the concept of new world order and world government emerged after the Second World War. The formation of United Nations was first step in that direction. The concept world constitution was proposed by many international lawyers. The reason behind that was globally mankind was facing similar problems, experiences, and challenges, and by adopting world constitution, certain measures can be made for the running smooth world order and prevent world crisis of the Third World War. Jurists like Kant, also in his writing, mentioned about the cosmopolitan constitution for real prospect of humanity. It certainly need a code of common values, rights, and responsibilities. In 1947, the first attempt was made in USA to frame world constitution. One committee was formed in this regard, which is titled as Preliminary Draft of World Constitution. This committee was formed at the University of Chicago, headed by Chancellor Robert Hutchins, the University of Chicago. The committee issued a statement of policy published in July 1947. This stated that it may be that the machinery and the authority of the UN, if UN so decides, will prove someday to be the best available stepping stone toward a real world union. Next slide, please. In this slide, I'm speaking about the concept of nation state theory. It begins with the concept of nation or state. Therefore, we must understand first what is a state. It simply means that territorially bounded sovereign polity that is ruled in the name of community of citizens who identified themselves as a nation. Prior to the concept of modern nation state theory, older states were governed by the rule of legitimacy. In dynastic states, a prince was entitled to assume the mantle of power upon the death of his father. In the late 18th century, French and American Revolution began at the ideal of the modern nation state theory, which is ruled in the name of nation of equal citizens. In modern era, we can analyze that this state has built on a particular ideology like religion, race, ethnicity, language, etc. Generally, there is a feeling of patriotism and nationalism in its citizen. This binds people together in the name of common nation. Every nation has its own ideology, religion, language, culture, race, and history, and it distinguishes them from the other states. Likewise, their form of polity and type of government are also different. Most importantly, they are sovereign in their capacity, which means they are completely independent and no external force can command or control them. Next slide, please. Next point is about world constitution and nation state theory. The concept of world constitution and the nation state theory both goes in different direction and plays opposite role to each other. On one hand, World Constitution speaks about coming all states together under the one roof and the common world order. On the other hand, nation state theory protects the state from any outer control. With the establishment of United Nations and the governance of international law, some changes had gradually took place. New policies like globalization of trades gives new dimension to the international politics. World has become a global village where all human beings are citizens. In this background, some international laws imposes obligation on the member state to act in accordance with the convention ratified by it. The reason behind that, some common problems are existed everywhere, no matter which state is belong, and this problem cannot be resolved in isolation, like environmental problems, terrorism, medical and health issues. Recently, we have seen the pandemic of coronavirus, which became threat to all human all over the world. This way, now both the concept of world constitution and the nation state theory are coming closer to each other and started a new era where both the concepts are on the point of golden mean. Next slide. In this slide, I am focusing on the role of United Nations and Security Council in enforcement of World Constitution. United Nations was established by UN Charter in the form of international treaty. It seeks international cooperation in implementing various international treaties. Any peace-loving state can take its membership when a member state voluntarily accepted membership and agrees to any convention and sign on it, then it becomes binding principle for that state. Speaking about UN Charter and World Constitution, some jurists also argues that UN Charter had a quality of a world constitution from its inception. Even in the final session of draft making of UN Charter in San Francisco, then US President Harry Truman compared the charter as a constitution that grows, develop. Okay, I know the time is up. I will sum up my presentation in some seconds. Um The idea was developed to see the United Nations Charter as a constitutional law of the international community, put into force by world sovereign global political power. Due to time constraint, I would like to conclude my presentation. Uh, I would like to go to last slide of the conclusion. Okay. Uh, Thus, the conclusion is the world constitution is the future of mankind. In this process, the role of United Nations is crucial. In a present structure of UN and Security Council, certain loopholes are there. Consensus and active participations of all nations is required in making of world constitution. Therefore, member states should be sensitized on the matter of framing world constitution. Similarly, the council members and its unity should be increased. These changes certainly move towards framing the world constitution in future. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thanks everyone for patient here. Thank you.
Now 3 minutes are reserved for any questions.
I read your question. I think there should be, as I mentioned in my conclusion, that there should be some sensitization, there should be some awareness. It should take time. It will take time to bring all together all these states and making consensus. In the coming time, I think it will be possible. So I think it should be made by giving or sensitizing more time or more awareness to the existing UN members. That way only this consensus can be bring in the United Nations, and that will be one step ahead in this direction.
There is another question for you. Can you say that the role of the UN can be replaced by the World Constitution?
I think at the moment it cannot be replaced at present time. As I mentioned that in the present time, it is not a reality. World Constitution is not a reality, but in coming time, in the future, it certainly is going to take place. We will certainly see, not in the recent time, but in coming years, it will be a reality. And that time, maybe some new world order, or maybe so many changes. There will be many changes as per the changing technology and all these things. Thank you very much.
I think we'll just take one last question. Could you please focus on the implementation mechanisms of the world construction? Dr. Kapil, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think we can just take one last question and then we'll move on to our next presenter.
Yes.
Could you please focus on the implementation mechanisms of the world construction?
I not got this question properly.
Okay, then I think we'll move on to the next presenter. Thank you so much. Our third presenter for the day is Dr. Monica Malik, Associate Professor and Head of Department of Law at Central University of Haryana. Dr. Malik will be presenting on the topic, Realization of Welfare State Role of World Constitution in Present Era.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Go ahead with your presentation, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, but I cannot see myself on the screen. I think my paper is there because I am not with any PPTs. I will like only to interact with the learned people. So I don't think there is a need for this paper. It is in fact the copy of my paper only.
Okay, no problem, madam. We'll stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, dear.
Yes. You can go ahead with your presentation, ma'am.
Okay. So first of all, namaskar. My hand-folded namaskar to the chief guest of today's international conference, Dr. Glen Martin, and then Principal Dr. Asmita Vaidya, who is very patient listener with a smiling face here. Then the convener of this international conference and all the organizers. Really, I congratulate you all for such a successful organization of this conference. So, and all the learned people and the dignified people who have joined this conference today. And the dear students also from the this college and other colleges also who are the part of this conference. So I am not going to word for the whole paper, as I have been given 7 minutes for my presentation. I will just like to give a gist of my paper. And the topic of my paper is Realization of the Welfare State Role of World Constitution in Present Era. So my focus is then that why it is required, why it is the dire need today. Because in the chat also, as we are looking, that everybody is curious that whether UN is not working well or some substitute is required, whether some turning point has come. So dear, I want to say that today, where we are living in the so-called modern globalized world, where human rights are celebrated every day we find that our United Nations organization, along with its specialized agencies, International Labour Organization, that is specifically working very hard for the same, and the non-state actors are also very active now these days, and At the same time, other international institutions and the non-governmental organizations, they are very hardly working. The purpose is the human rights. Reason is the human right is the subject and object of all the laws. And that's why we may find that today in this modern welfare world, all the countries, they are trying at their level best to provide such an environment in their own country by making the laws specifically to celebrate these human rights. As Dr. Martin has said, that if we go back to the Magna Carta period and then the coming at the international platform, the celebration of the human rights in the form of the European Convention, and then gradually most of the countries of the world, whether they were the signatory to that or not, they tried to make these the resolution of these convention as the part and parcel of their domestic laws. So if we talk of our country, we are also having in our part 3 and part 4 these human rights, the civil and the political rights. We gave them place in our Constitution of India in part 3, and we made it justiciable and enforceable. And the social and the economic rights, which we have preserved in part 4. In the same way, most of the countries of the world, not only those where the Constitution is supreme, because generally we say that today when we talk of the welfare world, generally the political arrangement in the form of the democracy, where the democracy is prevailing, whether it is direct or indirect, they are providing the maximum dignified life to the people because the participation of people is there. So if we look at different countries and their constitutions, we will find that either in the form of fundamental rights, just like in our country, or in the form of the Bill of Rights. You can look at the South African Constitution, then the Constitution of Sweden is there. In different forms, these human rights are protected and these supreme laws are there, and taking them as a source, as the umbrella protection. Then the domestic laws are there, which specifically focus upon how to make the laws according those fundamental principles. Now the question is that when all these laws in the form of the Constitution as the umbrella law, supreme law, and then the legislatures of different countries are there, who according to those basic principles, they make the laws, and then the same are also implemented according to their spirit, then why we say that there is a requirement of the world constitution? So here I would like to say that yes, all the countries are trying at their level best, but at the same time, every society, every country and every society, they suffer from some of such sort of complex problems which cannot get a better redressal by their own domestic constitutions. Maybe many reasons. Many countries are there where the demography is so much diversified like India. In our country, we may find the population, the demography is not uniform. A lot of people of different caste, color, religion, sect are there, but this is not a drawback of our country. This is the unique feature. That's why we say that India is a subcontinent. That is the reason. But at the same time, it becomes a big challenge. How all the people of the country, they should be provided a dignified life. That is one of the reasons why we have considered the secularism in a positive sense in our country, that we should respect all. So because of such sort of demographic diversification and many other societal problems of the country, even the laws are available, domestic laws are very nice laws are there, even then the society suffers from some of these problems. Let me give you example. One is surrogacy, cross-border surrogacy is there. Then the women-related issues are there. Today we say that the welfare state demands that the country, in every country where the women is empowered, where child is protected, where the senior citizens are dignified, that is the real yardstick of the development. It's true. But we also know that in most of the countries, there are certain aspects where the domestic laws cannot protect the women, and there the world constitution requires to exist and to positively interfere and to protect them. Let me give you example here also, because as in our country, the diversified population is there. So many civil rights, they are put within the domain of religion. The best example is of the triple talaq. Now it has been abrogated by the active participation of our Honorable Supreme Court. But because for a lot of, you can think that even after this Menka Gandhi case, then the dignityful life that was enshrined and it was quoted by the, in this case. And if, after that, you will find that in our society, a lot of change came. We began to think that we are not a police state, we are a welfare state. And if we are really a welfare state, then these laws should be properly implemented. But then you can think that where in our country, where such beautiful laws in the form of Article 21 is there, even then certain civil rights are dragged into the religious domain. And the Muslim women, they were suffered for a long time. Even today, we are suffering from nikah halala. Then many other such things are there. I am giving the example of our country, and our and really our apex court, it is actively participating in such sort of problems. So these are the problems of our country. Then the cross-border trafficking is one of the issue where all the countries, they require to come hand in hand. Their own constitution cannot solve the purpose until and unless there are strong regulations. A systematic interstate strategy should be available. This is one of the issue, as I have discussed with the surrogacy. Surrogacy is one of the issue when the human right violation has become too much frequent, because surrogacy, if somebody may ask me, ma'am, whether surrogacy is good or bad, so the morals of a country may differ, but the human rights are same for everybody. When we talk of the dignified life, we have not to think only of ourselves. We have to think about a child who is born out of surrogacy, one thing. And then commercialization of the surrogacy is very bad. It should be according to the necessity, and there should not be commercialization. But there are many countries even today where the commercial surrogacy is legalized. So the problem arises with regard to the child who is born out of that surrogacy. In our country, many such cases came before the Supreme Court, and because the bilateral laws of the two countries, they are not uniform, then it has to, then the child is a sufferer. Child is a sufferer. Baby Manji case of 2008 is a very good example of the same. What happened? That a Japanese couple, they decide to have a child.
I'm really sorry, but your time has concluded.
Okay, I will conclude it within a few seconds. So I was highlighting on these issues, just like the cross-border trafficking, just like the surrogacy, just like many of the aspects related to the women and the children. And then the environment, global warming, that is the very sensitive issue today. These all are the very complex interstate phenomena that can get a better redressal when we have a world constitution, and its creation itself is a big challenge because it requires a strategy. There must be certain international convention according to which it should be planned, and when and there should be a constituent assembly, and that should be made by the election process. And most of the countries of the world, developed, underdeveloped, developing, they should participate. There should be a proportional participation of those. Then only we can make a really, in a real sense, a strategic and a informative and a strong constitution. And when the question is of the enforcement, it can also only be done when we have the international government for enforcing the same. And we think that in future, really the learned people will come close, like in this international conference, and really we will make it a reality. Thanks a lot for being the patient listener. Thanks a lot to all of you.
Ma'am, there's a question in the chat box for you.
Yes. Yes, it's very true that the laws are very good and constitution, because our constitution provides for a positive secularism that says that it is the duty of our I think, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
It is our duty. It is the duty not only of the state to make the laws, to prevent the same. At the same time, the implementation should be very, very strong, because there is a lot of difference what our state is providing and what the instrumentalities are achieving. And at the same time, being the aware citizens of the country, we should participate. We should participate in such a manner that we should do the social engineering. Whenever such sort of things are there, we should try to pacify them. We should try to make the objective thinker and not the subjective that should be based upon the religion. We should not base our subjective thinking that I belong to this caste or to this community. Then if we become the objective thinker, then never such sort of problems will come to our society. It is my view in this regard.
Due to the paucity of time, I would like to call upon our fourth presenter today. Our final presenter for the day is Mr. Vinod Patil, an associate professor at Dr. Ambedkar College of Law, Aurangabad. But today he has some technical issues, so his student will be presenting on his behalf. His student is Anand Chakranarayan, a student of 4th year of Dr. Ambedkar College of Law, Aurangabad. The topic of the presentation is the concept of welfare state and world constitution.
Can I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I am very, very thankful to Government Law College, Mumbai, who organized 3 days international conference on World Constitution, a new horizon of a human right. And also I thankful to Principal Madam and Dr. Asmita Vaidya Madam, Sheikh Nusrat Afroz Madam, and Kritika Madam. So on the behalf of Professor V.N. Patil sir, they have some technical issues in their place. I delivered his paper on yourself. So I starting sir's paper. This word, all words of Professor V.N. Patil sir. Good evening to all of you, all the dignitaries, participants, and organizers of this international conference. I am Professor V.N. Patil, Assistant Professor, Dr. Ambedkar College of Law, Nagsen 1, Aurangabad, which is situated at Aurangabad, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, presenting my paper titled The Concept of a Welfare State and World Constitution. At the very beginning of my paper, I compared the Earth Constitution as an enlargement of the concept of welfare state, and then the concept of a Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, meaning the word is family. In the second part, I attempted to explain the background and development of the term social welfare state and its characteristic. In the next part, I dealt with Earth Constitution and its basic idea of humanity. Then I discussed the earlier concept of a world government and its early proponents, including poets, statesmen, philosophers, and lastly, the Indian concept of a Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. In the conclusion, I express my opinion about the constitution of Earth will one day rule the world as a utopian concept. No doubt it is a great idea to imagine that one day the world will have world government and it will be ruled by the Earth constitution. But being I am a practical man and I don't think it will happen one day. I thanks the organizer for giving me the opportunity to present my paper in nutshell, and I thank all of the participants for patiently hearing me. Thank you, madam. Paper will be presented, madam. Okay, madam. Thank you.
A big thank you to all the participants for such a wonderful and insightful paper presentation. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce our organizing secretary and our honorable principal, Dr. Asmita Vaidya, an academician, educator, social activist, and an able administrator whose vast experience in the field of academia and social service has placed her at the forefront of various social issues, effecting reforms and empowering people. Dr. Vaidya is also the recipient of several awards, such as the Tejaswini Award, the Nation Builder Award, and the Superwoman 2020 Award. She has served as the head of Department of Law at NMD College of Arts, Commerce, Law and Management, Gondia, and has acted as the principal of Gokhale Education Society's NB Thakur Law College, Nasik, before finally taking up the responsibility as the principal of Government Law College, Mumbai. As an accomplished leader, Dr. Vaidya has won over the hearts of all students at GLC with her enthusiasm and efforts to introduce a variety of programs and courses. I request ma'am to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you, Anushka. Ma Saraswati Lavandan. Today's inaugurator and keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. Glen Martin, sir, all the members of Governing Council, Government Law College, Mumbai, Honorable Justice Shri J.S. Patel, sir, Chairman, Governing Council, JLC, Mumbai, Honorable Shri Ashutosh Kumbhakoni, sir, Advocate General, Maharashtra State and Member, Governing Council, Senior Counsel, Advocate Rafiq Dada, Honorable Neeraj Dhute, sir, Principal Secretary, Law and Judiciary Department, Mantralaya, Mumbai, Honorable Vikas Rastogi, sir, Principal Secretary, Higher and Technical Education Department, Mantralaya, Mumbai, Dr. Dhanraj Mane, sir, Director, Higher Education, Pune, Dr. Sonali Rode, Madam, Joint Director, Higher Education, Mumbai, Honorable Chairman, Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa, all the delegates from different countries, all the delegates from different corners of Bharat, all college principals, teachers, academicians, lawyers, paper presenters, and students who are present here online. Very good evening to all. Wish you happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year 2022. It is said in Maha Upanishad, Ayam Nijaha Paro Veti Gadanam Laghu Chetasham Udara Charitanam tu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, meaning one is a relative and the other strange. Say the selfish people or the narrow-minded people. The entire world is family, live the magnanimous. And where we talk about one family, it implies that it should have some code of conduct, family discipline. That code of conduct is universe family for smooth existence of every element on earth is what I think, is enumerated in World Constitution. It is very difficult to visualize concept of world family and the existence of World Constitution to regularize its activities, because on globe we have different families existing at a time. Human families, animal kingdom, and every creature existing on earth are required to be respected. India's philosophy of the world being one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, is closely aligned with the mission of World Constitution. The spirit of coexistence was strong enough to overcome any kind of differences and barriers. The peaceful coexistence in the universe is supreme. This is the reason that our sacred prayer always ends with a prayer for peace, encompassing a prayer for the well-being of all. The idea of World Constitution may sound impractical in today's time of tensions and of terrorism, but it is a concept that has inspired India for thousands of years, and that ideal can be felt in every texture of our constitutional values. The life principles such as ahimsa, selflessness, good culture, samskaras, imbibing oneness, inculcating human values such as honesty, truthfulness, living with discipline, respect toward other living being, dutiful approach, responsible human behavior, coordination with ecosystem, sustainable development, brotherhood, equality, justice are the primary things which every human being is expected to go with. This is nothing but the moving from aham brahmasmi to idam namama. The human maturity amounting to realization of fact that I am not the owner, but the trustee of natural resources, and it is my duty to preserve it in its original form, will bring the world peace, and that is the soul of World Constitution, the spirit of World Constitution. The principle of compassion, of assisting those in need, of building capacities of our neighbors, or even of those further away, support our society, are the very principles that we want to bring to the international community through World Constitution. The ultimate aim is to bring happiness all over the world. The philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and the African philosophy of Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, also highlight inherent independence of our existence. It could also guide countries to observe sustainable development, prevent biodiversity loss, work towards mitigating climate change, and many other upcoming global challenges. At this point of discussion, I would like to focus on 10 Sutras of Bhartiyatva, which can be considered while framing World Constitution or amending the present World Constitution. The 10 Sutras are oneness, ekatma drishti, feeling that all are the creatures created by Almighty. Uniqueness, respect the diversity. Interrelations, that is, one must understand the interrelation between the living being. Ishwar Nishtha, that is strong belief on God. Dharma-based vikas, that is development on the basis of religious principles. Rashtriyatva, family values, sense of responsibility, scientific approach towards life. And the 10th Sutra is being non-historic centric, that is create new values of life. Looking to the present day situation of the world, it is necessary to go with life values and life skills, which will give us the way to the peaceful human existence. By imbibing all these 10 sutras as a preamble of the World Constitution, I think we can have rich World Constitution. We are engrossed with the address of Keynote Speaker, Dr. Glen Martin, sir, who is an author, lecturer, and professor emeritus of philosophy at Radford University in Virginia. He is director of Earth Constitution Institute and president of World Constitution and Parliament Association, organizations that sponsor the Constitution for Federation of Earth. I appreciate his presence and blessings to Government Law College, Mumbai. As a chairman of this technical session, now I move to paper presentations. In the paper, Realization of Welfare State, Role of World Constitution in Present Era by Dr. Monica Malik expressed that the concept of welfare state may find its relevant place only in the World Constitution. The complex and sensitive international socio-legal political issues like status of adopted children of foreigner parents that generally leads to parent alienation syndrome, the problem of enforcement of laws of divorce and the status of divorced women, trafficking of children and female beggars, bonded labor, surrogacy, and all the acts and omissions derogatory to the female and humankind in general can get a satisfactory redressal through the World Constitution. In the paper, The Concept of Welfare State and World Constitution by Vinod Patil, he tried to explain, his student on his behalf tried to explain the concept of welfare state from its beginning and acceptance of the social welfare state in Constitution of India, along with the characteristics of welfare states. The paper further focuses on the World Constitution, that is Earth Constitution. It also discusses the origin, its early proponents, and the Indian concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Dr. Kapil, in his paper titled A Dream of World Constitution and Reality, said that World Constitution is future of mankind. Though we are not in a position to adopt it today, but can be adopted by all nations in future. In the research paper titled The Concept of Welfare State and Earth Constitution Comparative Analysis, the researcher, Mr. Anand, made the comparative analysis of welfare state and Earth Constitution and discussed concept of welfare state and its significance, information about Earth Constitution and how it will work, and its importance and the welfare provisions of the Earth Constitution in detail. I congratulate all the paper presenters. I appreciate the hard work done by the convener, Professor Nusrat Sheikh Madam, co-convener Kritika Temburnikar Madam, and the General Secretary Ketayun Mistry, technical team leader Harshal, and all the student coordinators for their cooperation. I extend my wishes to Government Law College, Mumbai, and hope that all the participants will enjoy the academic feast. I really appreciate the presence of all the honorable members of Governing Council, all learned lawyers, academicians, chairmen of different technical sessions, all the teachers, law students for their overwhelming response. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I would now request Professor Kritika Temburnikar to deliver the vote of thanks.
Anushka?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Anushka. A very warm greetings of the day to one and all present in this inaugural ceremony and technical session 1 of this 3 days international conference on Constitution of Human Rights. As the session has come to an end, I, Ms. Kritika Timber, co-convener and assistant professor, Government Law College, Mumbai. I'm expressing my sincere gratitude on behalf of the organizers, Government Law College, Mumbai, towards all who are present here to grace this occasion. First, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Glen Martin, President of the World Constitution and Parliaments Association, for accepting our invitation as chief guest of this international conference. Sir, the work you have been doing since decades towards towards bringing the concept of world constitution into reality is so commendable that when it was being discussed and decided to organize this conference, there was no second thought in our mind than calling you as the chief guest and keynote speaker for this inaugural session. And we felt very honored and privileged when you readily accepted our invitation. Sir, I thank you for gracing this occasion with your thoughts and insights on world constitution. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to thank all the paper presenters of this technical session 1, Mr. Anand Kamble, Dr. Kapil Chorpagar, Dr. Monica Malik, and Mr. Vinod Patil for presenting their research papers on various topics under the sub-themes of idea and need of the world constitution. Your keen research reflected from your papers have surely helped many of us to understand the significance of world constitution in today's time. Thank you, everyone. Now, I would like to thank all the members of Governing Council for their constant support and encouragement. I also thank our organizing secretary of this international conference and our beloved principal, Dr. Asmita Vaidya. This idea of international conference on world constitution is her brainchild. Thank you, ma'am. I would also thank all the academicians, lawyers, dignitaries across the globe, the adjunct faculty members of GLC present in this session, all my senior colleagues, Professor Dr. Ratu ma'am, Dr. Panchbhai, Professor Duffel, Professor Kavita, Dr. Aswad, Professor Anita, Professor Gadapwar, Dr. Shweta, and Dr. Dule for your presence and support. I thank Professor Nuzhat Sheikh, the convener of this conference, and Professor Ruta, coordinator professor of this technical session 1. The entire technical team, all the volunteers, and last but not the least, all the participants present here. I thank each and every person who's directly, indirectly, relentlessly working for the success of this conference. I believe that the upcoming sessions will be a wonderful journey where we all will be discussing various aspects of world constitution. We anticipate your participation with the same enthusiasm in all the sessions ahead. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, one and all. Over to you, Anushka.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And before we conclude today's inaugural session, I request everybody to switch on their cameras so that we can take a group picture. Now I would like to request everybody to stand up for the national anthem.
Thank you, Martin, sir. Thank you very much. I'm thankful to Murthy sir also for his presence. Even Mohammad Sahib Hussain sir is also here. So thank you, sir. And I hope all will be there in the next session too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
sir.
Thank you, everyone. Anushka?
Thank you, everybody. That was it for today's session. Have a very good day and see you tomorrow.